Hey everybody, welcome back to another installment of Andy's Music Vault, The Other Leg. I am Andy Nichols, co-host of the popular Paul McCartney podcast, Two Legs. And on my own channel, I use this for everything outside of the Beatles and Paul realm. And if you've watched this channel, you know that most of that content is Yes and prog rock related. And today, I am very, very honored to have a guest on my show, somebody who I've been following in the podcast world for a very, very long time for my Yes fandom. And joining me today is a co-host of the Yes Music podcast and author of the forthcoming book on Tormato called Yes, the Tormato Story. Joining me today is Kevin Mulryne. Kevin, good afternoon.
Hello, it's delightful to be here. Looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wow, there's so much to talk about this book. You've had quite a busy few weeks. I very enjoy your weekly update emails when I see everything you've been up to, and when I always look forward to reading that email every Monday when it comes out. I'm like, okay, he's done this, okay, we've got this, and it's really thorough, and
yeah,
you've given your fans and viewers and readers a lot of information and keeping them up to date on everything you've been doing with the book, and we'll get to all that a little bit down the line. And about Tormato, even outside of it. And I've got your collection of Tormato stuff is incredible. I have a few things here as just a yank that I'll show, but you have the international Tormato everything, and we'll get to all that.
Yeah, a few things.
Yeah, a few things. Kevin, tell us a little about your background. How you got into Yes, your fandom of Yes. Well, actually, I read it from the book, so I now know that I know. I read the introduction, which was great. Yes. Obviously, I haven't gotten through the whole thing, but. Tell us a bit about your introduction to Yes and your fandom of Yes.
Yeah, so it's very simple, really. I mean, I was initially a violin player, a classically trained musician, but at the same time, back in the 1970s, I was listening to Queen and various other bands at the same time as all the classical stuff. But then a friend of mine lent me a cassette, and back in those days, and you probably remember that. We shared music by taping vinyl records and sharing it around to our friends. And he gave me a cassette, a C90 cassette, and one side of it was 90125. And this was 1983, so 90125 had just come out. And the other side was Tormato. And I listened to 90125 first, and then took the tape out and turned it over and, and then listened to Tormato, which was the first progressive rock, the first progressive version of Yes that I'd ever heard, and it just completely blew me away. I didn't know what this stuff was because there were so many different elements of rock and pop and classical, and the harpsichord on Madrigal and all those sorts of things, and the science fiction thing. I was very keen on science fiction. I saw Star Wars the previous year in 1977. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind and all those sorts of things. And so I was very deeply into science fiction as well and reading novels and so on. So when this package of Tormato hit me between the ears, as it were, it just amazed me. And that's what got me into Yes in the first place. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because this is the basis of a lot of my listening from 1983 onwards. So I then branched out into Close to the Edge next. Just because I liked the way the cover looked. Back in those days, it was almost impossible to find out about your favourite bands because all we had was the music press. Yes were never on the telly, or at least the original version of Yes were never on the TV. 90125 had a bit of coverage, of course, because of Unrivaled Lonely Heart and all that sort of thing was in the charts. But certainly finding out more about the band was very difficult. I couldn't find any books, any articles to read up on the band, so I just had to go by what I saw on the sleeve notes. So yes, I went via Close to the Edge, and then probably I think Drama, because that looked to have a very nice cover, so I stuck that on, and that was very different, and branched out from there to the Yes album and all the others, Tales from Topographic Oceans and so on. So yes, that was very much the start of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting introduction to see how people join on their fandom and then work their way backwards, as you did. You kind of went there, and everybody has their entry points and where they pick up the band and how they work back. Some people are first generation fans, other people pick them up and go, okay, and then you just get gobsmacked and you hear it and go, okay, this I like this. I want to find out more. And interesting about the books, and your book is such a welcome addition. And there's been a lot of, I would say in the last 10 years, there's been a nice addition of Yes books. But back then, I think you had Dan Hedges' book, which came out in 1981 or 82.
Yes, it was around then. Yes. I did know someone who had that, but I couldn't get hold of a copy myself.
No, it was hard. I mean, in the 90s, you had Tim Morse's Yes Stories, which was a great book, a great resource, and of course, David Watkinson's Perpetual Change, which is just epic. So it's nice that there's been a few, in the last few years that have been written since, and your book is going to be such a welcome addition to, to my knowledge, the only book that covers one Yes album from cover to cover. Am I right?
Yeah, there is just one other which is close to the edge. The story that close to the edge. The How Yes's epic defined prog rock, I think is what it's called.
A dedicated book, yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't do the same sort of things as my book. It puts Close to the Edge in the context of the all the other progressive rock that was around at the time and came afterwards. So that's not what I do in this book.
No. So moving forward to the Yes Music podcast, which is a podcast you co-host with your co-host there, Anthony, who is also in the States, right?
No, I'm in the UK actually.
No, Anthony. I know you're in the UK.
Yeah, Mark Anthony Kay.
Mark Anthony Kay, right?
He's in Canada.
He's in Canada, so he's not a Yank. He's not like me. Okay.
No.
Yeah. How long has the Yes Music podcast been going on, and how did that how did you start that?
Okay, so that's been going on since August 2011. So it's quite some considerable time now, and we've just published episode 580 of that. Initially, it was a solo podcast just by me, and the reason it came about is because I started listening to podcasts a couple of years before 2011, and I thought to myself, well, I could do this, couldn't I? And so I tried out a few things on a different podcast, which was only a very short, just 6 episodes or something, about something completely different, about education, because I was in education. I was a teacher at the time, and I wanted to learn how to do it properly. And there's a guy called Dave Jackson who's a podcast teacher in America, and he was running a thing which he called the Free Podcast Boot Camp, and the idea was for him to teach you exactly how to podcast properly. And it was free, but you gave a donation at the end anyway. So I had to decide, because part of the course was to launch a podcast, I had to decide what I was going to do a podcast about. And so I thought I was going to do it about educational technology, which is something that I've been interested in and worked in quite a bit over the past 30 years. But my idea was to interview educators about technology, how they used it in their classroom and those sorts of things. But I just thought, I'm not going to have time to do this. All the content is going to be reliant on other people. I'm going to have to book the interviews and get them to explain stuff and so on. And I just wasn't going to have time to do it. So I was thinking overnight, because I had to come up with this idea for the podcast the next day. And I thought, what else can I bang on about every week, constantly? And hopefully people will want to listen. And I thought, well, yes music, that's the other thing I can talk about till the cows come home. So I thought, I'll do something about Yes Music. And so the name just came to me, Yes Music Podcast. And by the next day I had drawn up plans, as it were, to launch the podcast. And it was just literally, I had to talk about something. And so that was the subject I chose.
I've been a listener probably since, I think I picked it up around 2013 or 14. So I've been listening for a long time.
Remember? Good.
It's been incredible. 580 episodes. When did Mark Anthony join as a co-host?
It's a very good question. I ought to know that off the top of my head, shouldn't I? But it was certainly 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, what he did was he used to send in initially written reviews of Rick Wakeman albums, because he's a big Rick Wakeman fan and an authority on Rick Wakeman. He used to send those in, as I say, written, and I used to read them out each week. And then he used to send in audio reviews of Rick Wakeman stuff, which I used to play. And then I thought, well, this is daft, isn't it? We might as well have because he's basically co-hosting by sending in these reviews of albums every week. So he might as well just join me, and we'll do it together. So he joined me at that stage and became the official co-host. And yes, he's been there weekly pretty much ever since.
Yeah, it's one of the things about being a podcaster, which is I enjoy about yours, which we try to do on Two Legs, is to stay fresh and current and drop weekly episodes. It's the way you have to do that to stay current, and you guys do that, and we try to emulate the same thing with ours to do that, because if you do a one-off and then you revisit every 2 or 3 months, there's no consistency, and you've got to build something, and you've done that with the Yes Music podcast, and then you've done it so well to serve the Yes community for all the information and everything that you cover. It's so comprehensive. It's tremendous.
Yeah. Thank you.
I said, jumping to the book. Okay, so we're gonna jump to the book now. You've called it Yes, the Tormato Story. Why a book just on Tormato, which I'm sure you're gonna get asked a lot, and I already know your answer because I read a good chunk of the introduction. So
yeah.
Listen, my favorite lineup of Yes is this version that did Going for the One, Tails, and Tormato. So it's always been a favorite record of mine. I know that Alan White, he's quoted in Tim Morse's book saying that whenever they toured America, got albums to sign, Tormato was the one that always people brought to him to be signed. So give me other than your personal connection to it, which was your entry point. What part of why do you think this chunk of history, Yes, late '77 into all '78, deserved its own book? And just really kind of just talk about the research of it. Was it difficult to do?
Well, the research was one of the things which made it so much fun to do, and I'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah,
I think Tormato, yes, as I've already said, it was my gateway album, as it were, into progressive rock and into specifically Yes. But I think there's an awful lot to the album, and it doesn't really matter whether you love it or hate it. And lots of people love it, lots of people hate it, and I've come across quite a few people who don't like it. But what I've tried to say is that I've really used the album as a jumping off point, as a way to get into some of the fascinating topics of Yes, and particularly when they were approaching Tormato. There's this idea that the band was falling apart at this stage. Was they were worried about punk. They were worried about a new generation of fans, and they were very established, and they'd played to hundreds of thousands of fans in various different venues and across the world, and had done enormous concert tours and been extremely successful, particularly in America. That was the place that was really their number one, and Philadelphia particularly in that continent. But there was a feeling that they had to do something, had to change some things. And as I researched it, I found that each member of the band was trying different new things. So Going for the One with Awaken and all those other epic songs in there was, you can see it as a sort of the end of an era, and it's sometimes called the main sequence of albums, and that finishes with Awaken. So what were they going to do after that? There was certainly some pressure, I think, from the record company to start, shifting more units to making sure that the band could continue and release very high-selling records. In those days, that was where you made the money, was from the records. It wasn't from touring. It's flipped completely the other way now, of course, because live concerts are where musicians make their money, not from recordings with all streaming and those sorts of things. So they definitely had to, and Yes are a band who have always wanted to move on to the next. That's the whole point of progressive rock, is not to do the same thing again and again, is to move on, try some new things. So it did jump out to me, the fact that Chris Squire was trying new equipment. He's got that amazing and actually unique sound of his bass on Tormato. He didn't continue with the sound, and I was fascinated to know why not. But I was also particularly fascinated to know how he got that kind of harmonized sound that he gets on some of the songs on Tormato. And certainly there were more songs on Tormato than previous albums, particularly when you go back to something like Tales from Topographic Oceans, which has only got 4 songs on over 4 sides. There are 8, 9, depends on how you how you count it, songs on Tormato. They were shorter, deliberately shorter, and I wanted to know why and how they produced some of those effects. So for example, talking about science fiction earlier, some quite science fiction-y effects on there. I wanted to know what the instruments were. I wanted to know how the recording sessions were set up, what their attitude was, how it all fitted together. And in terms of research, which was the other part of your question, I suppose the point at which I realized I could put something together into a book on Tormato was when we managed to find Peter Woollerscroft. And Peter was the tape operator at Advision when Yes came in to record Tormato. And he's an amazing chap. He doesn't work in the music business at all now. In fact, he's bought a cafe, and he runs the cafe now with his wife. But back in those days, he was a young, aspiring producer and an engineer, studio engineer. But he was the lowest of the low at Advision, and it was his job to wrangle all the tapes to make sure all the different takes of the songs were available. So when Chris Squire said, "I want to join take 3 with take 27," it was Peter's job to get those physical pieces of tape, cut them up, and splice them together so that they could work on that. So he had a pivotal role, although he wasn't producing, and of course the band produced themselves. He wasn't even engineering, but he was there every single day that they were recording at Advision. Peter was there. So, he certainly knows what went on. He understands what the process had been. He knew what the equipment was that we were using, how they got the sounds, what the dynamic was like with the band. And I managed to find him. Fortunately, his surname is extremely unusual, Woollerscroft. And I couldn't find anywhere online where I could find him himself. So I eventually went through Facebook, and I found a member of his family, I think his daughter or his niece, whose surname was also Woollerscroft. And so just out of the blue, I I messaged her on Facebook and said, "Oh, this is an interesting surname you've got. Are you related to Peter Woollerscroft by any chance?" And yes, indeed she was. And so she put me in touch with Peter, and he's been absolutely brilliant, filling us in on all the details. And fortunately for us, he wrote a diary of his time at Advision, and he's actually made that into a book now, which may be coming out soon. But he remembered a huge amount about those initial Advision sessions on Tormato, and so he was an absolute fount of knowledge about that. And from then I did similar things to talk to quite a few other people who were involved with the album, particularly people like Colin Elgie, who did the design of the inner bag of the album cover itself, not the outside but the inside. And I managed to talk to people like Poe from Hypnosis who did the cover, and I talked to the people who did the photograph, the photograph of Yes tour in the background, and all sorts of people I managed to track down, and they were all absolutely delighted to talk about the album and their part in it.
Yeah, and that's one of the amazing things when I read your weekly updates, and so I've gone here and I've documented this, I've gone here, and you've really done, like, it's almost been like a geographical study of the album too, and and that leads me to my next question: is why did they split up the recording sessions between Advision and RAC between February and June of '78? Why the splitting between the two studios?
Well, simply because they ran out of time at Advision. So they spent 3 months recording the backing tracks. All the backing tracks were pretty much finished by the time they finished 3 months at Advision, but there had only been time to record guide vocals from John Anderson. So they were in a stage where they couldn't stay at Advision. Advision was booked by someone else. So the band had booked Advision Studio 1, huge studio, had booked it out 24 hours a day for 3 months. And this was blooming expensive. So you can imagine that the record company were having kittens by this stage. And and after 3 months, they literally had no more time left at Advision. So they had to pack everything up and go somewhere else. The only place they could find which was available was RAC Studios, which wasn't that far away from Advision. It's about a mile from Advision in London. And they had to pack everything that they had in that big studio and cram it in to RAC Studios, the biggest studio they've got there. And you can see from the photographs I managed to get from Dave Watkinson, who we've already mentioned, who wrote Perpetual Change, the book about Yes. He went along to the Tormato sessions at RAC, and the photographs are amazing because all the kit that they had in this big studio is literally crammed into RAC, and they're falling over things. It really is quite amazing to see Rick's keyboards all just piled up in a big stash in the middle of the studio. I don't know how they managed to record anything at all, but they did, and so they finished it off. They did the overdubs and all the proper vocals at RAC, which is maybe one of the reasons why the band weren't, and most, not all, other people think that the mixing is not brilliant, and that could be something to do with the change of studios.
Okay, so that video that we see of the band doing Silent Wings of Freedom in the studio with John strumming, is that RAC or Advision?
That's Advision, apart from at the beginning of that video, there's a fascinating point where the band open some glass doors and walk into the studio, and you see them setting up in Advision. The doors are at RAC, and the interior shots are from Advision.
Interesting.
Because Dave and I went back to RAC in January, just gone, to see if we could have a look in the studio. And unfortunately, we couldn't get into the studio itself, but we went to RAC and we went in through the doors, and those are the glass doors. So those two pieces of tape have been spliced together. It's also got some great footage of the photo session at Blow Up Bridge just down the road from RAC, and we went there and found the spot where they took those photographs for the back cover of the album.
Right, which I'll get to in a minute. Let's talk about Eddie Offord, because you mentioned him. Eddie was in the mix he's in for a little bit, and then he quickly exited, right?
No, again, this was fascinating talking to Peter Walliscroft about this, because Peter Walliscroft has only met Eddie Offord once. So for every day apart from one that Peter was in with the band recording Tormato, Eddie wasn't there. Oh. And as far as Peter is aware, there was never any intention of Eddie being involved with the actual recording. The only thing that we think possibly he did record, Eddie, was some of the rehearsals before they went into the studio. So where you find online, Wikipedia and various places which say that Eddie was initially involved and then left, doesn't seem to be the case, because as I say, Peter Walliscroft was there every day, and he will tell you, no, Eddie did not come in apart from once, where he came into Advision with a crow on his shoulder.
Which makes sense, because obviously Yes did going for the one by themselves in Switzerland. So why they came back to London, fine, to do Tormato. So I can't see them, welcoming Eddie with open arms again.
Well, Eddie was in a pretty bad state at this stage. He was suffering the effects of doing whatever you do as a rock star in the 1970s, because he was essentially part of the band, wasn't he? I mean, he played the tapes for them live. He was with them all the time, and he was essentially a sixth member of the band. But he suffered dreadfully from the lifestyle, put it like that. And he certainly wasn't in any physical or mental state.
Eddie wasn't
in any physical state to really help.
Yeah, which is a shame, because obviously his period with the band is so celebrated with what he did, and it was nice to see him speak about it, though, on the documentary, the classic artist Yes documentary, and see him speak about his time, because you hear about you read the sleeve notes, Eddie Offord, and it's like, oh, it's actually nice to put a face with a name and see somebody who put so much time with the band. But as you say,
absolutely.
The band was self-produced, basically, going for the one and Tormato here. A question on the instruments. Now, you listen to Tormato, people say, oh, it's such a busy record. It's Rick and Steve just battling out it for 40 minutes. And, I'm not a musician. I play a little bit for fun, but I'm not a serious, but, the Chris's bass, Rick's the keyboard sounds that Rick, used on this album. Can you speak a little bit about that in terms of a technical aspect?
Yeah, so, I mean, the most interesting things for me as I said earlier, was the things that they were trying out, the new techniques, the new approaches, the new instruments they were trying out on this record. And for Rick Wakeman, that meant very little in the way of mini moog, which he was, is known for. Of course, his soloing technique on that instrument is legendary. But he had both the Birotron, which was something which he was heavily involved with, creating and funding, and also the Polymoog, which was supposed to be a polyphonic, therefore it could play more than one note at a time, and was supposed to be the follow-up and the successor to the Mini Moog, and give musicians much more of a palette to explore, really. And the interesting thing about that instrument is that Moog, it was initially part of a three-part setup called the Moog Constellation, and this had the Taurus bass pedals that we know that Chris Squire used. It had the Polymoog as the kind of mid-range, and it had something called the Lyra, I think it was called, which was a high soloing type high range frequency part of it. So you were supposed to buy all three elements and use them at the same time. This didn't take off at all, and the Lyra part of it disappeared. And obviously the Taurus bass pedals were used by bass players mainly, but also by keyboardists. And the Polymoog was a terrible failure. So he used that, and he also used the Birotron, which I'll say a bit more about in a second. So he had two mid-range instruments. And one of the selling points, or one of the things that people thought they were going to get from a Polymoog was a big, rich, deep, full-bodied sound. But in fact, that's not the case with the Polymoog. It's quite sort of spindly sounding. It's quite thin sounding, and so is the Birotron. So he had those two instruments, both in that kind of mid-range on the album, and he really wanted to promote the Birotron and used it quite a bit on Tormato, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And then Steve Howe, his guitar was also in that range. So that's one of the reasons why Tormato sounds like it does. Rick Wakeman, if you want to put it like that, Rick Wakeman had two keyboards in the same range against Steve Howe's one guitar. And so Rick was always going to win. And Steve Howe said this, he said that he thought that the two of them were battling it out. And certainly on Tormato, he's always complained that there are too many guitar notes and too many keyboard notes on there. He just wants to go back and simplify everything, if he possibly could. So anyway, the Birotron, though, has been absolutely fascinating to dig into that. And Chris Dale is the chap who, American, who has now bought the Birotronics trademark. So he now owns that. And he's in the middle of, or getting towards the end of, hopefully, a process of restoring a Birotron and restoring the sounds, the original sounds for the Birotron, and putting it all back together again so that he's got a fully working Birotron himself. So in the book, I call it the rarest musical instrument in the world, because this was a musical instrument based on 8-track tapes. So the point was that the Mellotron, which is, of course, the iconic keyboard instrument of progressive rock, the Mellotron was on tape loops. So you have these massive pieces, long pieces of tape in a Mellotron, and each note plays a different tape, and it winds round. And the problem with the Mellotron, well, one of the many problems with the Mellotron is that it only has 8 seconds worth of sound, and then you have to rewind the tape and start again. So that means that you can only ever play chords which last 8 seconds, and then you have to stop. So what they wanted to do with the Birotron was to solve that problem, and they solved it by using 8-track tapes, which is exactly the same as the old 8-track tapes that you put in your car if you're in America, or an 8-track player, and that's got a continuous loop of tape inside it. So the easiest way to explain it is that if you press a chord or a note on a Birotron, the tape will just play until you finish that chord. It'll play indefinitely, forever, if you hold the chord down. So that was their way of getting around the limitations of the Mellotron. However, and I go into it in great detail in the book, but there were massive problems with building these, because everything had to be miniaturized, everything had to be precision made, which was incredibly complex, incredibly time consuming, and incredibly expensive to do. All sorts of people were interested in getting hold of Biotrons. So Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Rick Wakeman himself, anyone you can think of in the charts at the time wanted one of these Biotrons and ordered them. So they had over 1,000 Biotrons ordered, but in fact, it never got out of the prototype stage. So no one ever received a fully working production Biotron. So the Biotron B90 has always been a prototype, and there were very few of them completed. Rick Wakeman had, I think, 4 or possibly between 4 and 6 Biotrons, and that's because he invested heavily in the company. So in 1978, he actually owned the patent for the Biotron. It had been originally patented in 1976, but he bought it out and invested heavily in the company, and they were being made in the UK by Biotronics. But it was so expensive to develop this thing that they never got any further. So the idea was that you could buy replacement tapes or additional tapes from music shops, and they would have a vast library of different sounds you could buy on these tapes and put them in the back of your Biotron and use them. But that never happened. And so all the tapes which exist are the original 8 tracks. And of course, with tape, they degrade over time. So all the original tapes are pretty much unplayable now. So what Chris Dale is doing is going back and digitizing any of those tapes that he can find, saving them, and then recording them onto new old, as it were, 8-track tapes, so that at least he has one set of working tapes which he can use on his own Biotron. So amazing. And the photographs that there are of Rick Wakeman playing on the Tormato Tour in 1978 and the 10 True Summers Tour of 1979, you can see him playing Biotrons, and he's even playing, I think, more than 2. He plays 2 on those tours, but I think he plays even more than 2 on perhaps even 4 on the Going for the One tour. So it's something he was very deeply interested in, but something which just failed because it was very difficult and expensive to produce. And then just around the corner were digital instruments. And so as soon as digital instruments started coming online, everything based on tape was just blown out of the water.
Yeah, it was right around that time, wasn't it, then, where everything just kind of changed over?
Early 80s, yeah.
Yeah, what was that? I'm trying, 90125, what was the one? That was at the Fairlight.
Fairlight,
right?
yeah.
The Fairlight, yeah. That was a big in around that time.
And Jeff Downs was one of the key developers of approaches to Fairlight, particularly in live music. Yeah.
Yeah. One another final question on instrumentation regarding the song Madrigal. I've seen, if you've watched the Yes Classic the videos, he explains it's a Thomas Goff harpsichord, and you see, of course, the intro, and Rick's over the top with the yes ring, sits down in that kind of regalia. And then when you watch the video, you see him playing, but the keys are in the black keys are white and the white keys are black. Can you explain what the difference is between was he playing the harpsichord in that video, or was that a totally different instrument?
Okay, so that's a different instrument. So this was another absolutely fascinating thing that I learned. So the Madrigal video is, first of all, completely mad. If you've ever seen it, it's just insane, and it is actually very interesting in terms of the development of videos, of music video in itself, because it does use some quite advanced for the time techniques. So John Anderson and everybody else turns up in the middle of the keyboard and kind of superimposed over everything else, and it's a very interesting video. However, nobody knows, including Rick Wakeman himself, because I asked him, nobody knows why there is a video of Madrigal, because it was never the intention to release it as a single or even as a B-side. So Rick just cannot remember why they made a video of it. Anyway, they did. So he got all dressed up in 18th century costume, and they had some actors as an audience in this amazing Regency drawing room, and he walks in all his frilly clothes and all his finery and sits down at the harpsichord and starts playing. But no, the harpsichord he plays in the video is a totally different one. It's not a Goebel harpsichord at all.
No.
It's made by, I'm not going to remember the name of the manufacturer, and it's a different English manufacturer. Yes, Goebel. Sorry, it is Goebel and Sons. That's who made it, Goebel and Sons. And what it's not is a Goff harpsichord,
right,
which is what he plays in the studio for Madrigal, to record Madrigal. And the reason for that is, again, lost in the mists of time. I think probably the reason it's a different one is because that harpsichord was already in that room. So when they were looking around for a location for this video, they found a room which was about the right age for the instrument, and they found a room with a harpsichord already in it. I think that's what happened. And so this is a completely different one. It's actually a much nicer looking instrument. It's got a beautiful, if you can imagine the video, it's got a beautiful floral painting around the sound hole on the top of the instrument, which is zoomed into at one stage. And it's a almost brand new harpsichord, which had been made by, as I say, the Goebel and Sons producers in Oxford in the UK, but based on a much older instrument, which is in the US. So yeah, all these sorts of things that I dig into are just well, fascinated me anyway.
No, it fascinates me as a Yes fan, which is why I love learning stuff about that. You can really hear Chris Squire's kind of choir schoolboy background when you hear Madrigal, especially towards the harmonies, towards the latter bits of that song. Especially when you watch the video, his vocal abilities are so. Everybody, John is John, but Chris as a vocalist is so fantastic, and Madrigal is just this shining example of Chris's abilities to harmonize with John.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. The only thing which is a bit annoying about Madrigal is that you can't hear his Moog bass pedals in there, no. And that's one of the places on the album where it would be fantastic to hear that. Actually, Miguel Falcao, who is our Chris Squire bass specialist, and he writes a little bit in the book for me about Rickenbacker bass, the Chris's Rickenbacker. He's pointed out that if you listen to the video, you can hear a bit more of the bass pedals in the Madrigal video than you can on the album. So that's something to listen out for when you have
It's amazing that they, as you say, they make a video for it, but it was never intended to be a single at all. But we're going to go ahead and make a video for it. I mean,
really bizarre.
And I don't know if it would have done well as a single, because it is kind of like a little bit of a waltzy type, whimsical Renaissance, as Steve likes to say. John in his Renaissance period, kind of.
Yes.
It's that same kind of thing. Although maybe like Wondrous Stories Part 2. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. But I think it was pushing the envelope too much to release it as a single.
Let's talk about one of the major sticking points that a lot of people either love or hate about Tormato, and that's the cover.
Hey.
Let's talk about the cover. Now, I'm holding a 2013. I believe this is the gatefold. The only time Tormato was issued in a gatefold.
Friday Music.
Was the Friday Music, and I couldn't. When I saw it as a gatefold, I said, "Oh, gotta grab that. It's a gatefold. You don't see that too often."
No.
So obviously we know the sleeve was designed by Hypnosis.
Yep.
I've often thought that the back should have been the front cover, but as we know, Yes was never going to be. The members of Yes were never going to be on the front cover of an album. Tell us a little bit about the artwork decision. What went into it? Was there any kind of squabbles over the artwork internally with the band? Yeah. And obviously, the tomato on the back.
It's one of the aspects of the album that pretty much from the moment it was created, the band themselves have disliked, to put it that way.
Right.
Hated. They really were unimpressed with the cover. And I got a fantastic contemporary interview which was done by or one of our friends on the podcast, who is Doug Curran. And Doug was a DJ and interviewed bands at the time. And when Yes came in 1978 on the Tormato tour to North America, that's where he caught up with them, and he asked them specifically about the cover, and they all agreed that they hated the cover. He said to them, "Can I ask you about the cover? And can we talk about the cover?" And they said, "Do we have to?" They were really unhappy with it. Excuse me. Oh, dear me. Excuse me. Yeah. So yeah, they were really unhappy about it. Hypnosis were the new kids on the block, weren't they? They were the hot property in cover design at the time. They had done Going for the One. John Anderson was very, very keen on Hypnosis, and it was fascinating to note that John Anderson's classic masterpiece, Elias of Sun Hillow, the art, not the artwork itself, but the art coordination and that kind of aspect of the design were done by Hypnosis. So they were a company he already knew and had used. Then they did Going for the One, which they actually brought to Montreux to show them the concept for that. I don't quite know what they thought of that at the time, but anyway, they did decide to continue with Hypnosis, despite Steve Howe, for example, really not wanting to. Steve wanted to get back to using his great friend Roger Dean's artwork, and apart from the Yes logo on Tormato, that's the only little spot of Roger Dean artwork on there. But they agreed in the end, and I think really when Poe came and showed them the artwork, I think really just to get rid of them. You know, they were in the middle of producing the album. They probably didn't want to be bothered with too many other decisions. They were working on the music and trying to get that right, and so I think they just sort of by default went with them. But again, when Poe brought the finished artwork of Yes Tour in the background and the diviner, the water diviner with the sticks on the front, when he brought that in and showed the band, they were very unimpressed with it. And at this point, again, unfortunately, the real full story is lost in the mists of time. Rick Wakeman is absolutely convinced that he threw the tomato. So when they first brought it, there was no tomato on the front cover. The album at the time was going to be called Yes Tour, which was Steve Howe's idea, and he was very, very keen on it being called Yes Tour, which is the rocks in the background, is the photograph of Yes Tour.
Right.
So he was very keen on that. He was really angry about the tomato. So whoever threw it, it was thrown. Poe took it back to Hypnosis, and they photographed the tomato on the front cover. Whether it's the same tomato or not, I don't know. But they took a photograph of it, brought it back to the band, and showed them it with the tomato on.
And they said,
at which point, somebody, again, it's not clear who it was, but somebody said, "Oh, we ought to call it Tormato," and basically as a joke. And the band just went with it, as you say. They just, I imagine they were just sort of throwing their hands up in despair and saying, "Oh yeah, go on then, let's just go with Tormato. We're at the end of our tethers. We may as well just do it and have a joke cover."
I'm glad you brought up the Yes Tour concept, because that was going to be the actual album title name, Yes Tour. And can you explain? I know this goes into a little bit more geography. Now, Yes Tour, this is actually out in Steve Howe country, right? So with like west, out by Devon, right?
Yes, it's in Devon, near Oakhampton, and that is, yes, very close to where Steve Howe lives, and incidentally close to where the Yes management offices are today.
Right.
So that's very, very close there, and also fairly close to where Jeff Downes is based in Wales. So they're all around a similar sort of geography there. And so it was a guy called Rob Brimson, who was sent to photograph Yes Tour, and Poe sent him off. And originally, when I spoke to Poe via email about the cover, he claimed that he had taken the photograph. He had gone to Devon, but he hadn't. It was this guy Rob Brimson who had. And Rob Brimson went and because Yes tour, and it wasn't particularly good weather when he went. Yes tour is out in the middle of a moor, and about 45 minutes walk from Oakhampton, which is the nearest town. So Rob decided to head off over the moor in his car, which is not strictly legal. You're not really allowed to, I mean, there's footpaths and stuff, you know, but he went off in 1978 in his car across the moor and managed to fall into a ditch and damage the steering of his car. Excuse me. But eventually he managed to get to Yes Tour, take that photograph that you see on the front and back in the background, put lots of filters over it to make it look sort of otherworldly, and brought it back to Poe. And when he suggested to Poe that Poe might like to pay for the damage to his car, which he had suffered as part of this trip, Poe declined. If you put it like that. In fact, he got very angry and said it was ridiculous because they hardly earned any money from doing these covers anyway. And latterly, they've had a phone call, and Poe has actually apologized to Rob Brimson for that. But anyway, that was the situation at the time. So yes, that was Yes Tour, and the idea of having that, and you can see a lot more about Yes Tour if you look at the inner bag, which was designed by Colin Elgie. And on the inner cover there, you can see on the left hand side it's got all the ley lines. So these are all the tours which are connected up by so-called lines of power all across the world, and John Anderson very keen on this concept of ley lines and power lines and so on. And yes, that was the brief given to Colin Elgie, was to go away and make something like a map with these ley lines on it to go behind the information on the inner cover. Oh, and the other thing I should say about Rob Brimson is that he is the guy on the front cover. So the guy holding the rod.
I was gonna ask you about that. who's the chap actually on the cover?
Yeah, that's Rob Brimson. And at the time, as you might imagine, with the way things were done in those days, Poe said to him, "Can you just come and put this costume on that I've got? These nice things here. Just stand there." And he took a photograph of him. Rob never knew that photograph was going to be used for the cover of Tormato.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. That's interesting.
Yet another.
Any truth? I forget what book I read this in. That the jacket that Chris is wearing actually was not his. It was. It actually had to airbrush in and write his name on it. It was. I think it was one of the roadies. I think, or something.
It was. So many names. I've got them all written down here so that I don't forget any of them.
Was it Nigel? Maybe Nigel Lubies. I don't know.
No, it wasn't. It was the manager, the road manager. Let me find his name. You can tip this bit out. Halley. Yeah.
Jim Halley.
Jim Halley.
Yeah.
So yes, it was Jim Halley's. So Chris had forgotten his, as you might imagine.
Great classic story. And if you can't see, look on. They're all wearing jackets, and they've got their names on the jackets.
Yeah, and you can just about see the names.
You can see.
Chris,
but
Chris forgot his, and fortunately, Jim Halley had his tour jacket with him. And one of the nice things in the book is I got some photographs from Jim Halley, and he was there at the shoot for that photograph, which is why he lent his jacket to Chris. But what I've got from him is some behind the scenes photos of Poe taking the photograph. So Jim took photographs from a different angle, so you can see the band and the technical people actually doing the filming and the photographs. And in one of those, you can see the back of the tour jacket. So I didn't realize that on the back of the tour jacket it says Yes Shows. So I think it's from the going for the one tour, and so it says Yes Shows in that beautiful Roger Dean lettering on the back of each one of those jackets. But yes, he had to give his. So in fact, in the original photograph, the real photograph, it says Jim, not Chris, and so they had to. There was no Photoshop in those days, so excuse me, they had to paint it out and paint Chris's name over the top of it.
Interesting. Moving ahead to kind of where Yes is at with the album now, in your book, interesting, you reproduce a couple of tour programs from the 90125 thing, and where they list the full discography. And curiously, Tormato was just left out. So
Yeah.
obviously, and that's kind of where I was up to in the book. Just looking at this past introduction, it's like, was there a deliberate attempt by the Yes camp to really kind of just conveniently forget that Tormato was a canon album?
Yeah, there seems to be. So I don't know whether it was the band themselves or partly the band and the record company, but however it happened, Tormato itself went out of print completely during that period, and so you've got 3 tours up to the Big Generator tour. So the Drama, the 90125, and then the Big Generator tour, and none of those tour books have Tormato listed as a Yes album at all. So yes, you're right. They kind of tried to erase it from the history of Yes at that point. And I suppose you could say that the reason it didn't appear in the catalogue was that you couldn't get hold of a copy at the time because it was out of print. But it does seem very odd to have airbrushed it out completely at that stage. And perhaps there are lots of Yes fans who would agree with doing that, but I certainly wouldn't.
Not at all. Let's talk about the 8 tracks on there. Let's talk about your favorites. I mean, I'm sure you love the whole of the album, but what are your favorite moments on Tormato as songs individually? Top 2 or 3.
Well, I like in some ways I like some of the unpopular stuff. I do like Madrigal, but I particularly like Onward, and that comes from my background as an orchestral player. So I really love the strings and particularly the French horn solo, and I've always loved the way that is integrated into the song. And I think it's quite unusual the way the accompaniment works with the beautiful melody. And I don't think it's one of those songs which manages to stay clear of being sort of cheesy and a bit saccharine. But manages to stay away from that completely. And I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful love song, and very different to really any other song I can think of in the whole of the Yes discography up to that point, at least, if not up until today. So I think it's unique in terms of Yes. Magical because we've got that Andrew Price Jackman strings in there as well. And the harpsichord, the original, ancient instrument in there. I love that texture there as well. And release, I always really like the power and excitement of that song. But really, the On the Silent Wings of the Freedom is a Yes epic, a mini Yes epic. So that would definitely get my vote every time. And famously, they've just rehabilitated it and played it live last year without the Chris Squire introduction, which is extremely controversial. I think most people, if not all people I've spoken to, think that the Chris Squire instrumental beginning to that should have been played live. But Steve is very clear that he didn't want that, so it didn't happen. But I thought it would have been fantastic to see Billy playing that, and he has played it on other records, other tribute records, and so on as well. But yeah, I think that's a tour de force. I think it's the most stunning piece of lead bass playing, and the rest of the song itself is magnificent as well.
It's interesting because the one song that actually, of any legacy that Yes has maintained with Tormato, is the stalwart "Don't Kill the Whale." That's the song that the band has decided to really flog and play a lot. I've seen Yes almost 50 times. Most of that was when John was still with the band. I've seen them probably half a dozen times with John Davison, and I saw them with Benoit as well. But "Don't Kill the Whale" was like the only time that you got anything out of Tormato, and they did a very nice arrangement of it. It was a little different take on it, but something like the Future Times Rejoice. I know a lot of the Yes fans have loved. They were like, "That's such a great opening track." How could, and it was done, and they did play it live on a few dates on the tour, as I recall, but I don't think it stayed in the set list very long.
No, and I think it suffers from the same problems as some other energetic Yes songs. They just couldn't reproduce that kind of energy live consistently, and so they felt that it didn't fit, and they would have to expend too much energy. And often Steve points out that when he improvises lines in the studio for something like that song, he's unhappy with trying to reproduce them live. And that's a point of view, and that's why he said that he didn't want to play the opening of On the Silent Wings of Freedom, because he wasn't happy with his own guitar parts. And so rather than creating new ones, he didn't, which is not really his bag. He really wants to err on the side of playing songs as they were on the album. And despite the fact that they were obviously much younger in 1978 playing live, that was one of the songs which just didn't gel. And I suppose I'm not a band musician. I can't get up on stage every night and play rock instruments, so I don't know quite what it's like. And if it doesn't gel, then there's no way you can continue playing it or flogging it in a concert, I suppose.
No, and it's, but they have given some, they obviously after Chris passed, they started playing Onward, and you did get the band also playing Madrigal, I think on the 50th anniversary. Yep. I saw them do Madrigal on the 50th. I think it was in 29. Was that the Royal Affair tour? I think I saw they did that then. They did. Which was nice to see them play that. So obviously you're going to get you're going to get smatterings of it, and it's nice that over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, they realized, okay, we've got to shake up the set list somehow. And some people want to hear something from Tormato. Well, what can we actually play that works as pieces? Obviously, Onward, as you mentioned, is a beautiful song, Chris written, so they included it. Madrigal, Steve plays beautifully on it, so they can include that. It's he wants to play it. Steve is only going to play what he wants to play. Another quick question, a little memorabilia, just here on stateside, is the 45 of Picture Sleeve of Don't Kill the Whale. And one of those rare instances in the Yes history where a B-side that was not on an album and a track called Abilene, was that ever intended for Tormato?
It was certainly recorded during the Tormato sessions at RAC. I don't think it was recorded, any of that was recorded at Advision, although I could be wrong about that. But certainly it was one of the songs which could have been. I mean, there was this story, although, Rick Wakeman, this is 45 years ago, so everybody's memory is going to be a bit dodgy, but certainly Rick Wakeman doesn't remember this. But in articles at the time, Tormato was originally planned to be a 2-record release. So they were going to release Tormato Part 1 in 1978, and then at the end of 1978, or in 1979 probably, they were going to release Part 2. And this was because when they originally did the rehearsals, they rehearsed dozens of songs, allegedly, and had enough material, they said, for at least 2 albums. Now, Rick Wakeman doesn't remember this, and he's pretty much sure that wasn't what they were going to do. And in a way, you can imagine John Anderson and Chris Squire, because I think those were the two who are quoted as saying this. You can just hear them saying, "Oh yeah, we've got lots and lots of material, and definitely enough to do 2 albums. Yes, let's do it now." Whereas the rest of the band might be a bit more reticent about it. But yes, that was the idea. So that and songs like Money and those sorts of ones would have turned up on a second album, was the original plan.
Right.
But no, Abilene just on the B side in most places, not all places, because Release was on the B side in Canada and the US and the Philippines.
Interesting. I love that bit in the Yes Years documentary when then Steve Howe does talk about it, and he says Ahmet Erdogan heard it, and he said, "Well, if it's all going to sound like release, then it'll be good." And of course, and of course, it wasn't all like release. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about. Here we are, 45 years on, and a record that's so polarizing. What do you know other than say? I mean, Steve Howe has a recent quote as of 2022 that he still wasn't too fond of the record. What are the other band members' takes on it that you've talked to and conversed with? What are their feelings and thoughts on it now in 2023, or recently when you spoke to them?
Yeah. So Rick Wakeman is keen. He said that it was the worst mixed Yes album of all time, which was a shame because there were some good songs on it, and so he'd like to see it he said to me he'd like to see it remixed. If he and his current producer could do it, he would like to see it remixed, is what he said. Yeah, Steve is a bit up and down about it. I don't think he would want to play it. However, John Davison and Billy Sherwood are very keen to play the whole of Tormato live. To have an extension of the album series that they've done quite a number of albums in, and they'd like to do Tormato. Of course, they would have to persuade Steve, and I don't think Steve would be particularly keen on that idea, but John very much is. So we, as I say, we spoke to him on Friday, and he had already said that Tormato was one that he'd like to do the whole of, and he had already said in a different interview that Billy shared that view. I think Jay would be up for anything. I'm not sure about Jeff. I haven't spoken to him about that idea, but certainly the rest of the band, the younger members, if you can call them that, would be very keen.
Yeah, comparatively, right? Yeah. Interesting. Let's jump ahead 45 years or so, because Yes is still active and current, and they've got a new album coming out called Mirror to the Sky. Yep. And have you heard anything? Have you heard the full album or anything, just what's been released? Have you heard the whole thing?
Yes, we were very kindly sent a review copy. And so when we spoke to John on Friday, we asked him quite a bit about it. I think it's a fantastic album. I think if you were slightly disappointed with the Quest, then you won't be with Mirror to the Sky, because I think it's great. The title track is 14 minutes long, and there is no law that longer songs are better songs, but in this case, I think it is true. It's a long song, it's a complex song, and it hangs together extremely well. There are lots of progressive elements to it, different time signatures, lots and lots of changes, different sections, and I think that's very much the song that people will be talking about when they hear it. And it's just less than a couple of weeks to go until release date on the 19th of May. So I think there'll be some very happy Yes fans.
Yeah, and it's an exciting time to be a Yes fan when you think about it. We've got your book coming out this month. We've got a new Yes album coming out, and John's on tour with the Band Geeks, and I just saw them twice, and he was incredible. He was absolutely incredible. Have you seen some of the videos? Yes.
We did we looked at the complete first show they did. And Richie Castellano has been on the podcast, and he's such a great guy, and a fantastic player, of course. And I think it's brilliant that we have these the Band Geeks and John playing all the epics and the hits, and they sound fantastic. They're taking them at such a fast speed,
so fast,
remarkable. Oh yeah, amazing. But yeah, John still sounds fabulous.
He really does, and it's not a perfect world, in a perfect world John would be playing with Yes, but it is what it is, and thankfully both incarnations are still with us to give us that music. So if those of you that support, I don't like to get into politics too much, but if you embrace the new music, and Billy Sherwood's a good chap. I've interviewed him a few times, and I've talked to him for years. Even when The Ladder came out, I remember emailing him and telling him how much I loved The Ladder. So there's plenty of music out there to be enjoyed and appreciated by all, even if it's not either one is your cup of tea. I don't think there's any need to, kind of say, well, which one is better, or any of that nonsense. What can we expect? Tell us about when the Tormato Story is going to be published. Where can people find it, and where can people get it?
Okay, so I'm hoping that it will be published on the same day, the 19th, the same day as the Yes album comes out.
Wow.
Now, unfortunately, I've had some production delays. The guy who's doing my typesetting has been ill, unfortunately. So it's not quite ready yet, but I'm still got my fingers crossed that it will be coming out on the 19th. Also coming out at the same time is, I can show you this. This is hot off the press. This is the color supplement.
Oh,
so
okay.
Because I have published the book myself, print on demand.
Yes.
Firstly, that means it's available throughout the world, which is fantastic. But it also means that I've had to do it in black and white. So I've produced this, which is a little A5 booklet, which has got color versions of the photographs from the main book. So those
So
are the Jim Halley ones.
there's the Jim Halley photos. So all the photos
Yep.
that are in the book are in
Yep.
black and white. These are in color. Oh, fantastic!
Yep. So, and there are some extra ones in there from the Wembley concert in 1978, for example. And I've also put a little map in it showing all the important places around London
Where
where
tie into
Tormato
it.
was produced. So there's that. That's only available from the book website, which is tormatobook.com. Tormatobook.com. Whereas the book itself is currently the pre-sale for the book is open at the moment, and that's being run by Burning Shed. So if you go to burningshed.com, then you can pre-order that, and that's going really nicely. So I'm very, very pleased with that, and they're such a wonderful bunch of people at Burning Shed. Once it's released fully, it will be available from Amazon throughout the world and all those other
but maybe once so Burning Shed's handling the initial pre-order, and then after that you could get it on Amazon. But
you could,
the Burning Shed link is in the description below, so make sure you go to that and go pick it up. I've ordered my copy several months back, so anxiously waiting for mine, and it's going to be. I can't wait to read the whole thing, and you kindly sent me an advance copy just to give me a little way to prepare. But it's what it ended up being, 372 pages. 372 pages, and for you Yesaholics out there, it is everything that you could want to know about the band in terms of everything, the merchandising. We didn't even get into like the formats or the marketing. No. I did love the image of all the 25 versions of the cassette you had.
I got them just beside me here. Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple American ones. Like this is, you could probably tell me which version is this?
Yeah, that's the first one. That's the 1978 US cassette.
So this is the first one on cassette. Okay, see, this is why we had him on, folks, because he could tell me which is which. Yeah, this is because he knows. He'll know exactly which is which. If people want to contact you, ask you questions, inquiries, how could they reach you?
The best way to go is through tormatobook.com or through yesmusicpodcast.com. Both of those places will get you to the same place.
Fantastic. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for giving us some time here to talk about Tormato, the book. Again, folks, pre-order it. If you are a Yes fan of any ilk, of any fandom, get this book because it is so comprehensive. And I've got most of the Yes books, but this is one that I can, other than the Chris Welch book, which was fantastic, and I read that cover to cover, I cannot wait to read this one and refer to it back and over again, just for this one period. But he also talks about other periods in the band's history in the book too. It's not just about this period, because you reference lots of other periods and cross-reference it. Yeah. So it's going to be a book that we all Yes fans will love to cherish and hold, and I just can't wait for it. And much congratulations and success on the book, Kevin.
Thank you. It's been a delight to speak to you.
Yeah, and okay, folks, we'll see you on the next installment of Andy's Music Vault, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.